A major developing story, the mayhem in Mexico playing out on full display tonight after Mexican authorities killed the leader of that country's most powerful drug cartel. That killing has sparked retaliatory attacks across the country, including places like Puerto Vallarta. We have seen cars burned, buildings destroyed. Panic unfolding at the Guadalajara airport, as you can see from this video here. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico tonight telling Americans who are in the country to shelter in place. And this is who authorities say was killed Sunday. Nemesio Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, of the powerful Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He led one of the most powerful and ruthless criminal organizations in Mexico. He was wanted by U.S. authorities who offered millions to find him. Now, as the situation unfolds tonight, our investigative reporter Naomi Coles gives us an inside look into how this same cartel has spread its network here into the Carolinas.
The cartel's name, often abbreviated to CJNG, is a familiar one to me, and that's because I spent a lot of time last year with undercover narcotics officers on a drug bust that investigators said likely had ties to this same cartel. In fact, most investigators, experts, and prosecutors in this area will tell you that this cartel, CJNG, is behind much of the drugs trafficked through the Charlotte area.
CJNG is one of the most unique cartel structures we have. They almost operate like a franchise structure where people buy into it in different areas.
U.S. Attorney Russ Ferguson broke the news to me in an interview that one of the defendants in his office cases, set for sentencing next week, is believed to have actually run the local CJNG cartel branch right here.
He kind of owns CJNG in Charlotte, in the western part of the state. And he was originally a drug defendant. He was a drug wholesaler, and it is every type of drug you can imagine. It's fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine. We see all of it from CJNG. It's not specialized.
That federal case is one of several ongoing with suspected ties to this cartel. Ferguson said that CJNG's influence is massive and far-reaching. It's in every U.S. state in more than 50 countries. There was also a large bust of about 14 suspects back in 2023 in Charlotte that were all also suspected to be tied to that cartel. You can read more about my investigations into drug trafficking here in Charlotte right now online at WBTV.com. Reporting in the newsroom, Naomi Coles, WBTV, on your